We're live once more for the preview show. As always, Harry Powell joins me, Ian O'Neill, and we are going to discuss the latest UFC installment. That is UFC Fight Night. Holm versus Mayra Silva, and Albert Jurayev versus Ju Young Park in the co-main event. Harry, I mean, there's no really reason that we can't really buttercoat this. I mean, we're going from one of the probably the best cards that we've seen on paper, and one that delivered in hindsight. Obviously, we have to give this card time to blossom and carry out. But I mean, on paper, this card is not great whatsoever. We will not be going as in depth as we normally would on the preview show. We're going to run through just a couple of quick talking points at the start of this podcast, just in general about the 135-pound division with Amanda Nunes retiring. That division is wide open. This may play a factor. This main event may play a factor in who may get the next title shot at 135. And yeah, that's about the only talking point that's really coming out of this card, Harry. Not a great card, it has to be said.
Hot steaming garbage. Welcome everyone. This is the preview show. Yeah, sure. Look, over the last little while, we really have tried to not necessarily naively find a way to enjoy these cards, or not naively try to put a positive spin on them, but more just be realistic in our expectations of the cards and look at what is solid about cards and what's poor about cards. There is one solid thing about this card, and it was added today, and that's that Jack Della Maddalena will fight on the card. Fair play to the gentleman that's stepping in to face him on a week's notice. That's absolutely not an easy task. And so, you know, whatever happens in the fight, fair play to him. And I hope he comes out safe, both of them. We'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, in the future. But there is one thing, right? Spencer used to call them hangover cards. And I think for this one, you come off UFC 290 and it's a monolithic event. One of the biggest cards we've ever seen, one of the best cards we've ever seen. We waxed lyrical about it on the breakdown show. These sorts of cards always come after. And I do think there is an element of, we were at such a high with UFC 290 that when we're then given this card only 7 days later, you're like, what in the fuck is this? Like, this is a serious crash down to earth. But I think I saw a stat of like, you have to go 8 fights into the card to find somebody coming off a win. Like, that's tough. Like,
yeah, it's very, very tough. Like, and I mean, look, we will, and we have on this podcast before criticized, and I know people definitely have people have their opinions on, you know, every fight matters and stuff like that. That's totally fine. But, you know, I'll always give my honest perspective about how I feel. I mean, that's on how you kind of react to how people like cards or how people don't like cards, or why you like a card or why you don't like a card. I mean, I think it's fairly out in the open and it's based off opinion. I think you can find meaning in a lot of these fights. And in fairness, you know, we said that we haven't complained too much about UFC cards, but in fairness, Harry, there hasn't been too much to complain about this year so far when it comes to UFC cards, right? We're still going to come on here and say that, you know, this card isn't great, because it really isn't if you really break it down and you really look at it. But, you know, it seems that cards like this are not happening as often as they did last year, which is a good thing to me. But at the same time, I mean, when you're looking at it from a Jeopardy or kind of a meaning point of view, like you said, 8 fights deep to find tough stretch, and we may be looking at a lot of fighters on this card that may not even be in the UFC in another 3 or 4 years, even if they make it that far. So look at Jack Della Maddalena is there. He'll take on Basile Hafez. Fair play to Basile coming in on short notice. I mean, yeah, you're kind of on death row there coming in again to face Jack Della Maddalena on 1 week's notice. Obviously, we have Holm in another main event here as well. But I mean, I think the big story coming into this, and it kind of probably tells the story of this card, is what next in the 135-pound division. Plus, we've been hearing some murmurs this week of a return of the former bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey to the UFC, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, and I feel that is a conversation for another day as well. But maybe I'll put this question to you first, Harry, about the 135-pound division. Obviously, we witnessed Amanda Nunes defend her title in Vancouver before she hung up her gloves, before she retired, and before she vacated her title. So now we are currently standing in the 135-pound women division with no champion, and it's wide open for the new contenders to come through. What way would you like to see that division materialize, per se, over the next year or two, Harry, when you see the talent that already exists there, number one, and some of the potential matchups that may be created? Obviously, Juliana Pena and Raquel Pennington are kind of slated to be the next in line to kind of fight for the vacant title. People are saying that's a boring fight. But I mean, the division as a whole in the 135-pound division right now, Harry, is not great when it comes to talent. A lot of veterans in the division, a lot of aging talent, a lot of people coming towards the end of their tenure there. And whereas I feel maybe the future of the 135-pound division right now is actually a lot of women who may move up from the 125-pound division. Just share your thoughts maybe on how you feel the 135-pound division is going to materialize over the next year or two.
So I actually totally agree with your sentiments. I think that for the most part, this is an aging division. This is a division that is in some severe need of a shakeup. And I actually think Nunes retiring at the time she did is kind of perfect for the division, because the gulf in class between number 1 and number 2 to 6 was drastic, right? And now you're looking at, I'll just reel off some names. Obviously, Juliana Pena, Raquel Pennington, Holly Holm is definitely back in with a chance of doing something in that division. If Irene Aldana can turn herself around after that devastating loss to Nunes, Caitlin Vieira is in there. Pani Kianzad, with a win over Caitlin Vieira, can put herself right into that title. Jermaine Durandamy is yet to come back. Mayra Bueno Silva is obviously fighting this weekend. And then, you know, the list drops off drastically from there, right? But any one of those women putting 1 or 2 wins together is immediately in a title shot. And I think the thing that's nice about this is, although, let's say, Juliana Pena beats Raquel Pennington, let's just say, or otherwise, a lot of those fights can happen again, because now it's for a title, right? You can sell it quite easily. New champion, has to run through the division again, has to clean out the division again. Fine, no problem. But the thing I see that's a problem is it's like a flame that's starved of oxygen, right? I don't see where the fresh oxygen is coming from. I don't see where the brand new 20, 23-year-old women that are coming through and coming up through this division and looking to make a run at it are really coming from. And that's worrying, right? Because all of the fighters that I've just named are at least 30 plus. And so, you know, that's a division is in a severe need of a shakeup.
Yeah, it definitely is. And that's why I kind of alluded to the 125-pound division as well, with some of the talent that's there. I'm looking, and I seen an interview that happened last week with Caitlin Chukagian, who, look, I mean, is not a young talent, that has to be said, but it'll be a fresh kind of insertion for her into the 135-pound division, where there will be a couple of fresh matchups. I'm looking at Erin Blanchfield, who already threw her hat into the ring to come up to 135. I mean, there's a chance she might make a run up there in the division. And I mean, there will be a certain level of freshness in the 135-pound women's division with Amanda Nunes, because there was such a gulf in class with what she brought to the table in comparison to the rest of the challengers in that division too. But I mean, it's a division that once was, you know, steeped with talent, but right now it's a division that's really, really struggling inside the UFC, Harry, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And I think if somebody like an Erin Blanchfield did decide to come up, she'd wreck shop up there. Like, obviously physicality is the thing and size is the thing, but man, the skill level is undeniable. And I think that there's something, and this is kind of, I don't mean to labor the point about young talent, but we've been so impressed at 115, at 125 with the introduction of sort of the modern MMA fighters that are coming through in those divisions. And I just don't see them at 135. And maybe you're right. Maybe a couple of the ladies at 125 see an opportunity. Maybe it's a really tough cut for them down to 125. And they're like, okay, grand, I'll jump up there. I'll go and fight some of them women. But I really think that whilst I'm happy and very, very grateful for fighters not cutting weight and choosing not to cut weight, I also think that there's an element where some fighters, and we saw it similarly with Dricka Duplessis and Robert Whittaker, there's an element where physicality comes into play, right? And if you're not a natural 135er and you're fighting a natural 135er, there are times in which skills can be diminished based on athleticism and size and just general sort of prowess, right? And that's not something I'm super happy to see either.
Yeah, and that's the fine balance, I believe. Like, you know, coming up from 135 up or 125 to 135, you know, you want to do it like, I guess the example is Max Holloway, and you know, the time he moved up, I don't think he did it properly. Just didn't have enough muscle up there, didn't have enough strength, and subsequently he got beaten by Dustin Poirier and sent back down to the featherweight division. But let's talk about what we do have on tap on Saturday night, and that is Holly Holm in the main event against Mayra Bueno Silva. When you look at this match, Harry, I mean, it's a fight for me that the main question I have is, will Bueno Silva be able to solve the puzzle of Holly Holm? Because, you know, even this late stage in her career, she's still a difficult matchup. She never made it easy with her style inside the octagon, and it's still kind of proven that way. Yes, she's lost a little bit of her explosiveness. Yes, maybe her gas tank has waned a little bit, but she's still in there, and she's proven over the last little while that she can still hang on. Obviously, she's coming off that win against Yana Santos, with Mayra Bueno Silva coming in on a 3-fight win streak with wins over Wu Anan, Stephanie Egger, and Lena Landsberg. I mean, none of the fighters we've mentioned that both women have fought are really great at that being said. And I really feel that this is going to be a chance for Mayra Bueno Silva to come in there and use her style, but she's going to have to fight very smartly and bring Holly Holm into the later stages of this fight. But will she have the gas tank to be able to do that? Will she have the power to be able to put Holly Holm away? Those are all the big questions I have coming into this main event.
Defo don't see her having the power to put her away. I don't see it being anything like that, really. I think the way I see this fight is Holly Holm made a point in her last one to come out and show the grappling improvements. She talks all the time about how she's still at 41 years of age working to be the most well-rounded mixed martial artist as she possibly can be. And there were some interesting wrinkles that we saw. Right now, Yana Santos, not a good fighter. At least in this division, not somebody that's going to be making runs at titles or holding titles or anything like that. But to go out and see Holly Holm move away from the style that she is so happy to compete with, moving around on the outside, loads of side kicks, little bits of bursts, little bits of bouncing in, bouncing out, that sort of fight, to go in and force the grappling and take Yana Santos down and rack up some control time and do that whole thing. That was cool to see, right? It's good to see. It's good to see that the confidence is there for her to show off these things that she's learning and evolving with. Mayra Bueno Silva, however, is one of those fighters where I think she needs to be opportunistic in this fight. Holly Holm loves a naked sidekick, loves one, absolutely loves one. If I'm Mayra Bueno Silva, I'm getting a 2-on-1 on that foot, and I'm running her down with it as she pulls it back, and I'm forcing her against the fence, and I'm trying to grapple. We know that she can submit people on the ground, and I'm doing my absolute best. If Holly Holm chooses to circle the outside, I'm just going to cut the cage off. I'm just going to pressure her. Yeah, I might take a sidekick here and there. Yeah, I might take a blitzing, whatever. But as soon as you can get the timing down of that blitz coming in, you're going to level change. You're going to try and meet her in the middle with clinches. You're going to try and work for underhooks, and you're going to try and put Holly Holm on her back. And as soon as that happens once, we're going to see if the evolution that Holly has talked about has translated over the defensive grappling side of things. Because Mayra Bueno Silva in her last 3 has finished them all, one with a retirement, but all with finishes, right? Either their submissions or a retirement. And look, I mean, this is to me, and maybe this is a harsh one as well, but you should be beating a 41-year-old Holly Holm. Like you should be beating a 41-year-old Holly Holm. We know what the game is. There's an absolute ton of tape on her. And so Mayra Bueno Silva should be coming in here with a game plan that's rich enough to be able to do the number on Holly Holm.
I mean, last person to get a win, obviously not too far away. Ketlin Vieira got the split decision win over Holly Holm in her last defeat. That was in May 2022. I mean, a contested decision, I guess, but that fight played out a lot on the feet. I think against Yana Santos, like you said, Holly Holm came in with that point to show her well-rounded distance. She chose to grapple quite a bit in that. Did that surprise you a little bit at this late stage in your career? Because, you know, we have talked about, you know, fighters sharing an unwillingness to change their style as they get, or maybe not even an unwillingness, just a simple fact that they're not able to, because all of their technique has been ingrained into their mentality through years and years of training, which makes it very hard for you to switch it up later in your career. Were you surprised to see Holly Holm do it? But I mean, I don't think you were, because my opinion would be I wasn't too surprised, because the level of competition would have allowed her to do that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, when you're in a grappling gym, for instance, right, you want to try something new. Well, you go and pick up a white belt and you force them into positions where you want to try the thing that you're trying, and then you try the thing, right? And it could go wrong. And it doesn't matter if it goes wrong, because you just work yourself back into the position again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And you do that for 3 months until you've gotten to a point where you feel pretty consistent doing it on a lower level. And then you work yourself up to a blue belt, and you work yourself up to a purple belt, and then you try and try and try and try, right? So for Holly Holm, was I shocked to see the evolution? Yeah, partially, because as you say, that sort of goes against the grain of what we expect, not for a 41-year-old necessarily, but for a woman that's been in combat sports for the amount of time that Holly Holm has across all of the disciplines in which she's competed in. It is very, very, very hard for a fighter to go and change their style. And maybe it wasn't a change of style. Maybe it's more like just an adding of wrinkle to a game, and her building some more confidence and spending some more time focusing on that specific thing. And I do think, just to argue my own point, right, that I've made many times before, is that I think more now than ever, fighters are becoming a little bit more supple in with what they're going to be willing to do in the octagon, mostly because the competition forces that, right? And I think obviously there's an asterisk against Yana Santos in that equation, because Holly Holm was able to just go out and basically do whatever she wanted. But I think with Mayra Bueno Silva, that's a slightly different thing. If Holly Holm goes out and puts a wrestling clinic on Mayra Bueno Silva, I'll be extremely impressed, mostly because those sorts of exchanges are where Mayra Bueno Silva wants to be. Now, do I see Holly Holm going out and trying to enact that game plan? No, I don't. I think we'll see a return, because it's the smartest and most efficient way to win, which is I'm just going to keep Mayra Bueno Silva on the end of my punches, on the end of my kicks for 5 rounds. Thanks.
100%. That's what I can kind of see happening myself in the main event. We talked about surprised. Were you surprised to see Albert Jurayev and Jun Young Park in the co-main event? I mean, this is a fairly lackluster co-main event. There's a couple of different fighters there that you could have maybe given this mantle to, but it's fallen on the middleweights. Not really too much to discuss about this co-main event. Any quick thoughts on this, Harry?
Yeah, it's shit. I've not, in the history of doing this show, I've never thought about giving the wave to a co-main event.
I was waiting for it. I'm not going to lie.
Close. Out of respect for the UFC's card placement, I won't do it. But this is an absolutely horrendous co-main event. It does absolutely nothing for the division. Neither of them are going to be pushing for a title. They have purely done this because Jun Young Park will go out and will take as many shots as you're willing to give him to try and land some. And they're hoping for some form of barn burner-ish type fight. Garbage. Absolute garbage.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Obviously, Jurayev coming in off of his split decision win over Chidi and Njokuani. Jun Young Park is coming in based off a 3-fight win streak. Eric Anders, Joseph Holmes, and Dennis Tululin, his victims in his last 3 fights. And that's about as much as we're going to talk about the co-main event. Moving on, Norma Dumont and Chelsea Chandler in one of the rare 145-pound fights. I think today I saw a tweet where the UFC, I think, have officially removed the division. So one has to think what meaning this fight will have. But like I said, if it means totally nothing, why are we having these women cut weight? I mean, if it makes sense to have them fight at their natural weight, I'm not going to argue too much about them cutting down to 135. I guess the biggest talking point here, Harry, was Chelsea Chandler, who mentioned that she had heard Ronda Rousey was coming back to the 145-pound division. And yeah, I guess that tells its own story about this fight, if that's the main talking point. What do you think about Ronda coming back? I'll share my quick thoughts first, and I mean, they're very quick. If the game had passed by Ronda Rousey when she got took out by Amanda Nunes years ago, there ain't no way she has caught up in those years when she's been away at the WWE, and the game is still going to pass her by. If she's going to be brought back into the UFC, she's going to have to be matched very correctly. Do you think she will come back and be a champion? I don't think so. How do you kind of quickly assess the potential rumors about Ronda Rousey coming back, Harry?
So it kind of just fills me with sadness, really, because Ronda won the game, right? She won the game in that she changed women's MMA. She managed to convince Dana to bring women's MMA into the UFC. She was the darling of the UFC for a long time, and that means she earned a lot of money. And so financially, she should be fine. She managed to find what seems like a happy and healthy relationship. She became a mother. She's got a beautiful, seemingly beautiful house where she's, you know, self-sufficient, and it looks like it's a dream living out there. She then transitioned over and became a star in WWE, and doing that is not easy in any way, shape, or form. Then obviously she tried to dip her toe back in. Why not, right? If you still feel like you can be competitive, you still feel like there's more that you can give, fine. She went in, gets destroyed by Amanda Nunes, fine. You can turn up at that point and you can say, sure, look, I tried. I still had the competitive edge. It didn't go my way. Fine, no problem. I do wonder, and I'll just say this as an outside, I do wonder that you take Ronda Rousey now. I mean, Amanda Nunes isn't there. Chris Cyborg isn't there. And so maybe she eyes this as a way of, well, none of these girls are good. Like, this 145-pound division basically doesn't exist. What are they going to do? Pull up Holly Holm again? I mean, she's 41. I'll grapple her, whatever. This Chelsea Chandler fella, who's that? I don't know who that is. Like, I wonder whether the element of her is, I can run through these no names. But I agree with your point entirely about MMA moving on, and especially consistent active training. But I just get the impression that the life that is painted for Ronda Rousey right now is one that's seemingly pretty perfect, pretty stable, monetary, family, support networks, all of those things. And I just struggle to understand why she would want to come back, you know?
Yeah, I know. Maybe it's the competitive edge. Maybe it's the lure of some money. It'll be interesting to see. What do we think about Norma Dumont and Chelsea Chandler? I mean, it's a fight that's probably just going to go all the way to decision, with Norma Dumont kind of just jabbing the face off of Chelsea Chandler. That's how I can kind of foresee this fight going down.
Yeah, I mean, Yulia Stolienko, we learned nothing in that fight for Chelsea Chandler because Yulia Stolienko is a horrendous fighter. Like, Norma Dumont's fine, right? She can do the fighting. You know, there's just not a ton to say here, you know? It's two pretty well put together, relatively average fighters. And I think I agree with you. This will be 3 rounds, and it will likely be a unanimous decision one way or the other. I'm not going to rule Chelsea Chandler out at this point. I was against with Dricus du Plessis, Rob Whittaker. I doubled down extremely hard on Rob Whittaker winning the fight, and sure, look, he comes out staring up at the sky, and I look like an idiot with egg on my face. So,
no, you don't, because the whole mixed martial arts community did that, and it was a very educated opinion, the same as everybody else. And people want to come on and throw shots and use MMA mats on social media, and kind of criticize some people's picks after the event has happened. But you know what? hindsight is a great thing, and we'll find out. We will find out what happens again with Norman Dumont and Chelsea Chandler on Saturday night, and we'll break it down whenever it does happen. The fight that you are looking forward is Otman Atzar versus Francisco Prado. That's a fight in the lightweight division, Harry, and I can even see the smile creep onto your face here when you're talking about this fight. What gets the juices flowing for you when you see these two guys getting matched up?
Well, Otman Atzar is obviously known for Baggate, right? Yeah, sure. Look, these things happen in MMA.
Hey, there's one sure way to get claimed as by Irish MMA media and Irish MMA fans, and that's turn up with a bag of spuds to an event and go to town on them. You know, we love an old bag of spuds from time to time.
Yeah, spuds. Yeah. Yeah. But for me, Francisco Prado, he's an interesting guy, an interesting prospect. In his fight against Jamie Mullarkey, it felt to me like this is a guy that's used to going out and being, I hate using this term really, but just like the alpha in his fights on the regional scene. He would walk guys down. You could tell this was his style because this is exactly what he tries to do to Jamie Mullarkey. He'd walk guys down. He'd throw massive shots, big, hurtful, mean shots, and he'd try to just blow people away, break their confidence, break their will with just straight, mean power striking. Jamie Mullarkey said, yeah, that's fun, dude, but I've seen this before. And watch what happens when you try and do this stuff. And he just put an MMA clinic on him, jabbed him, low kicked him, took him down, did all of the things. Great stuff. I'm interested to see now with Francisco Prado, at only 21 years of age, what evolution has been made since then. If he comes out and tries to do exactly the same thing against Otman Atzar, we have seen in Otman Azzaitar's career that his ability to sit down and throw shots. The Timu Pakalan knockout was absolutely horrendous. Now, Timu Pakalan is a man that when he gets knocked out, he gets knocked all the way out, right? Ask Mark Diakese. But the Karma Worthy knockout was a pretty solid one. And sure, look, if you want to stand in the pocket and trade with Matt Favola, anything can happen, fine. But I do feel like he has the ability, if Francisco Prado has not learnt from that Jamie Mullarkey loss, that if he wants to come in swinging, Otman Azzaitar can absolutely get him out of there. But I just think at 21, let's just keep half an eye on Francisco Prado, because the aggression, the confidence to come in there and try and enact that sort of game plan and to be able to still go after it after 3 rounds, that tells me a little bit something about his character. And that's somebody I'm willing to invest in, I'm willing to watch.
Yeah, indeed. I'm actually looking forward to that fight as well. You know, two guys who will be going out looking to finish, and that'll be exciting. And I think you can say the same, Harry, about the next fight in the lightweight division as well. And that's Nazim Sadikov, who's coming in here undefeated in his UFC career. Only had maybe one or two fights in the UFC so far, coming off the Contender Series with a knockout win, won via doctor stoppage on his UFC debut. Comes in here against Terence McKinney, who's been around the block now in the lightweight division, has got his first push, a guy who also likes to come out guns a-blazing to get his guy out of there. And, you know, these guys could come and clash, and it could be pretty exciting fight, this one, when it all kind of goes down on Saturday night.
Yeah, I really don't like the matchmaking of Terence McKinney, if I'm honest. Like, he was a guy that was just a really interesting prospect to me. You go Matt Favola, fine. You go Fares Ziam, fine. Both decent fights. And the fella's 26, 27 at this point, right? He's still a young guy. Drew Dober, sure, look, fine. He almost had Drew Dober out of there, and then Drew Dober did Drew Dober things. Right. Eric Gonzalez, fine. But then why Ishmael Bonfim? I don't think we needed to do that, really. Like, I don't think we needed to do that so soon.
But I feel that was set up for McKinney to go out there and get a spectacular win, and it couldn't have worked out any worse for him, because it was like counterproductive, because it was actually him that was on the end of a highlight reel KO. And I think that might have been UFC maybe banking on the overall skill set currently possessed by Terence McKinney, and they found out the hard way. But we kind of are coming in here with a similar enough matchup, a guy who's willing to bang. And I mean,
this is what I'm saying.
You have that problem in the lightweight division, similar enough to 145 and 135, is where there isn't really too many gimme fights in the 155-pound division, Harry. And I mean, we spoke about it in other terms as well when we were talking about Paddy Pimblett and who we're going to be matching him up with. And, you know, he got Jared Gordon, who's a difficult matchup and who he struggled with as well. And it's like, where do you go from here? But it's like really throughout the 155-pound division, you've got a lot of killers in there. And this is another potential landmine for Terence McKinney here. I am not coming in with the greatest of confidence in him coming in here and getting a knockout win or getting a spectacular win or just getting a win full stop, to be honest, because I feel Terence McKinney may get in his own way at the best of times when he steps inside the octagon, where he substitutes a little bit of common sense in his game for the entertainment and the excitement and for the love of the fans, maybe, when, you know, at this stage of his career, he needs to focus on developing, getting in there and winning fights. And that's it. Never mind your finishes, never mind your highlight reel knockouts. But maybe that's not within his character. He's like the lightweight version of Kevin Holland, perhaps. You know, maybe we're materializing that with his career. But that's how I feel about Terence McKinney. And, you know, he could go out there, put on a clinic on Saturday night and prove us all wrong, like you said before. But what would you think about my opinion on Terence McKinney?
I completely agree. To me, it's just wasted talent. Like, it's just wasted skill. Like, he's got power, he's got athleticism, he's got range, he's got size. And I understand. Look, 155 is murderer's row, whether you're ranked or unranked. One of, next to 135, the most difficult divisions for you to crack into a top 15. Getting into a top 10 is nigh on impossible. Top 5 is just ridiculous. You shouldn't even try. And then getting any higher than that is, you're just becoming insane. So, you know, I totally understand. But I also think that when you are somebody like Terence McKinney, who clearly has some natural aptitude and some natural gifts for this sport, it's almost wasteful for you to not go out and try to maximize them. And coming in again, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his second name. Who's the Sadiakov?
Sadiakov, I think, yeah.
Grand, we've nailed it. Fair play.
Yeah, let's just call him that for now anyway, for this preview show at the very least.
Sadiakov is a really well put together fighter. Very fundamentally sound, hits like a truck, and can carry that power over 3 rounds. That's a tough ask for Terence.
You're kind of facing a little, like, a guy, to me, with a similar style, having looked at him a little bit, as a guy like Ismail Bonfim, an explosive guy, a guy that can clip you at any moment and put you out of there. And I mean, is this what we're using Terence McKinney for now? This is the kind of answer that Terence McKinney needs to fucking answer for us on Saturday night. Is he going to be the guy who's developed his name and being up there with the likes of Dober and haven't been successful? Is he going to be a guy whose name is going to be used to build other talent in the division? Or is he going to be the guy who's getting a guy like Sadikov out of there and kind of propelling himself towards the top 15? Again, that's the big question for me coming in this fight anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, look, this will probably be fight of the night. Depending on what happens.
Yeah, it could be.
This will be fight of the night, right? That or Prado Ottoman Zaita. But look, I'm here for it. Let's see. I'm always happy to watch Terence McKinney fight. I'm always happy to watch Nazim Sadiakov fight. So I don't mind this fight whatsoever.
Yep. Nor do I. And that kind of just wraps us up for the main card section. Prelims opener. Or the headliner, I should say, Tucker Lutz. We're talking about names here, Harry. Here we go. Tucker Lutz versus Melsik Baghdasaryan in the 145 Baghdasaryan. Melsik Baghdasaryan in the 145-pound division. And this is another interesting one for me. I mean, you had mentioned this as well, that you were looking forward to it a little bit as well, and I'm just going to give you the floor. Tell me why you are looking forward to this fight.
Melsik Baghdasaryan is a fella who has trained alongside Arman Saryukin for a little while, which it's very interesting actually. It's jiu-jitsu again, Sean, just so you know. There's a gentleman, very, very, very good, about 6 years ago, very, very, very good jiu-jitsu player called Edwin Najmi, and he's an Armenian fella. And when Arman Saryukin came over from Armenia, Edwin basically put him up, taught him some jiu-jitsu stuff, like added some jiu-jitsu to the already like really, really good wrestling, and like sort of gave him a base in California. And Melsik Bagdasaryan has come through that very similar route, right? And in his matchup against Josh Culibao, he was absolutely beating the fuck out of Josh Culibao until he made a very, 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 very silly mistake, and Josh Culibao wrapped his neck with no hooks and put him away. Grant, these things happen in MMA. But the stuff that I saw in the stand-up from the Josh Culibao performance made me say, okay, cool. Let's see some more. Let's see if you've got the things. Because Josh Culibao is a pretty well put together fighter. No problem with a Josh Culibao fight whatsoever. No shame in losing that fight either. And so he comes in against Tucker Lutz, who at this point is a little bit of a veteran, right? He's been around the block a little bit. He's had a couple of fights. He's done a couple of things. And this is a fighter who can do the things, but also a loss to Daniel Pineda. Again, these things kind of happen. And I lost to Pat Sabatini. We know, you and I, quite high on Pat Sabatini when things go well for him. That's
good fighter,
yeah, that's a good fighter. And then, you know, down from there, he's got some wins in the UFC. So this is a nice matchup for Melsik Bagdasaryan. It's not too far away from where he was in his last one, maybe a slight step down. And I think that the UFC sees something in Melsik, given that he really doesn't like fighting at a slow clip. He's 31, and so if he's going to make anything in the UFC, it needs to happen.
That's what I was going to say. Bagdasaryan really needs to get a move on here at 31 years of age. So, I mean, there ain't going to be too much time in him waiting around. Obviously, he lost against Joshua Culibao in his last fight, and Tucker Lutz coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak as well. So a big fight in the 145-pound division. At 115, Amanda Nunes takes on the undefeated Victoria Dudakova. I'm just giving that fight a mention. Harry is waving me on, and I'm going to oblige on that. We move forward to the 145-pound division. Austin Lingo, who comes in here again, Mizucal Costa from Brazil. Any quick thoughts on this, Harry, before we go in? Obviously, we've seen Austin Lingo go out there. He lost against Nate the Train Landwehr in his last fight. And I feel Mizucal Costa he has lost against Thiago Moises. So another guys, look, we mentioned at the start of this, we're talking about a lot of fighters coming off losing streaks for the rest of this card, bar our next fight, I think. Any thoughts on this fight? Big fight for both guys. They'll be wanting to get the win.
I think Costa beats the fuck out of Austin Lingo. Thiago Moises is a really fucking tough first fight in the UFC. And there were moments in that first round where Costa was giving him a little bit of everything. He is, if he's the same fight that I remember, he had blonde hair on the night and he's got the skin pigmentation thing. And yeah, he was absolutely in there giving Thiago Moises everything that he could give. Now, obviously, sure, look, Thiago Moises is a really good fighter. These things happen, whatever. But yeah, Austin Lingo, I think, gets whacked in this one.
Absolutely. Dangerous times to be coming into the octagon with bleach blonde hair too, Harry. We've seen that last weekend with Dan Hooker. You never know. But let's concentrate on our next fighter, and that's Jack Della Maddalena, who has been inserted onto this card, thankfully. Praise the MMA gods that they given us a bit of JDM action. He comes in here against Basil Hafez. Credit to this guy, fair play to him, coming in here on 1 week's notice, taking on JDM, a guy who was on the cusp of fighting Sean Brady, which would have propelled him into the top 10 of the welterweight division. He gets the chance to compete here, Jack Della Maddalena, and that for one I'm glad of. I'm sure this is probably going to be a one-way beatdown. You know, he has the test of trying to kind of come in here at short notice. It's never easy, but all roads are leading to Jack Della Maddalena getting the win here, Harry. And look, let's talk about the fight first, then I'll have another quick thought on this fight before we move on to the next one. Your thoughts on this fight and Jack Della Maddalena? He's a special fighter from what we've seen so far.
Yeah, he probably is a special fighter, right? Like, look, I haven't gone and looked at Basil Hafez. It was announced about 3 hours ago. I've just got back from the gym and saw it. I've just had a quick look at his record. Fair play. He's got some wins. He's got some losses. Interesting, he has a draw against Jeremiah Wells way back when in his career. Obviously, we know that Jeremiah Wells could do the punching things. So clearly, if you're not getting whacked by Jeremiah Wells and you're going towards a draw, there is something that's going well in your career. But look, unless Basil Hafez at 31 years of age is coming in here and he's something special, then Della Maddalena is probably going to dispatch of him pretty quickly. We know that Della Maddalena has some really crisp hands, some really crisp feet. Sure, sometimes he finds himself in situations he shouldn't be, like in that standing D'Arce choke. But he is a fighter that we are going to see do some pretty interesting things in the UFC. And all credit, as we've said, all credit to Basil Hafez. Sometimes this is just what you have to do as a fighter. You take a really tough matchup on short notice and the UFC will reward you in your next performance. And so here we are. Fair play to both men.
Absolutely fair play to both men. Really looking forward to seeing Jack Della Maddalena in there on Saturday night. Genaro Valdez will take on Evan Elder in the 155-pound division. We'll move right on. Interesting fight in the 125-pound division that I want to stop on, and that's Tyson Nam versus Azat Maxim, who is 16-0, undefeated so far, coming off from a couple of the regional seeds in Russia. A really impressive 16-0 knockout. He's coming in here with 5 wins by KO, 6 wins by submission, 4 wins by decision. And we could see another insertion of talent in the flyweight division here with Maxim coming in to take on Tyson Nam here, which, you know, talking about difficult UFC debuts, this is a pretty difficult UFC debut against a heavy-hitting Tyson Nam, who's been around the block a couple of times at this stage.
It is, but Azat Maxim is 28. He's undefeated, clearly carrying hype. And so chuck him in. If he goes, Tyson Nam's actually the perfect matchup here. The perfect matchup, because if you go out and Tyson Nam destroys you, we know that we can start asking some questions about that 16-0, right? There's a little bit that we've learned about you from there. If he goes out and does the whacking of Tyson Nam, we can say, no problem, big step up. And so at 28 years of age, that's actually what you have to do, especially in a division like 125. There's no fucking around at 125. There are too many fantastic fighters down there. And so if this guy is the real deal, then chuck him in and get him in immediately. If he's not, fine. We could take the slow roll and he can just be a guy in the division that finds his way naturally. That's fine. But I think this is the right matchup early on in his UFC tenure. Obviously, as early as it fucking gets in his UFC tenure, but it's early enough in his UFC tenure where it's like, let's just find out here.
Yeah, 100%. You're right. And I mean, going back to our point as well about the lightweight division, I mean, there ain't too many easy matchups at 125 right now as well. That division is kind of shit hot at the minute as well. Moving on to the last 2 fights, just a quick mention. Carl Deaton III will take on Alex Munoz at 155. Ashley Evans-Smith returns to the octagon to take on Aileen Perez at women's 135-pound division. And that wraps us up for the preview show. Holm versus Bueno Silva is the main event. Jack Della Maddalena on the card, and a couple of other interesting fights that me and Theo will be there. Harry is taking a little bit of time away. He won't be back for the breakdown this week, but Theo will join me to break down this card. Looking forward to that. Harry, any last quick final words before we wrap up this preview show?
Fair play, Theo. Love you.
There we go. Follow Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell. Myself at IO'Neil MMA. We'll see you for the breakdown show next Tuesday, and we'll catch you next week for the preview show for UFC London. Goodbye. Take care. Good luck, and enjoy the fight.